Welcome, and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. We're joined back on the program with Rob Winnicke of Recovery International. Today we're going to be learning about how we can learn about a new designed way discovered 80 years ago that is peer-based self-willing training for people with nervous and mental conditions known as cognitive behavioral training. We're also going to discover some examples of bad habits regarding one's mental health, why temper is like sabotage, tips, strategies, and much, much more. I'd like to welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program today our guest, Rob Winnicke. Now, Rob, how would you define a nervous person?
Oh, but that's the beginning. Thank you. I'll take a look at that. What I want to tell you, though, is thank you so much for posting my previous interview on your new annualoregon.com website. We've gotten a lot of comments about its design and ease of use. I'll remind our listeners that my last interview is at the bottom of the main page. It's true that RI has been pioneering a new form of mental health aid, but for 80 years, that seems to be counterintuitive. But we're trying to modernize and we're trying to position ourselves to help 1 million people begin or continue their mental health recovery. There are a lot of nervous people in America. Dr. Lowe, who invented this system, 1937, a neuropsychiatrist, he would say that the situation in America today is almost guaranteed to give people either one or two or both kinds of temper. Angry temper now is when we judge everything outside our body, people, things, places, time. Fearful temper is when we judge ourselves. And when it comes to a nervous person, those two tempers can cause destruction, and we'll talk about how. But the nervous person that he talks about, to us it's an effective term because we at Recovery don't get involved in diagnoses and scientific names of mental health aid. We think recovery will help anyone, no matter where they're at in their recovery journey. So this nervous person that we all are, you might call us sensitive or introverts, or in Dr. Lowe's case, my dear one, we feel things differently than people who are not different. The outer environment can irritate a nervous person more than a non-nervous, I guess, normal person. So we try to use coping skills to build a tolerance to the symptoms that temper brings to nervous people.
Very well said. You know, it's quite interesting to point out, too, that, how would you describe how Recovery International helps people with nervous or mental conditions?
Well, the RI method is a cognitive behavioral method. And even though psychiatrists who use cognitive behavioral therapy in their individual sessions, they're licensed, but they're also very expensive. And they're not as available as you might think. I think statistics show that there's only one psychiatrist for 30,000 people in the state on an average. So besides the fact that we're talking about tens of thousands of dollars for psychiatric therapy, we're the most economical model for mental aid that you could find. Basically, what our peer support advocates, our leaders and our members, what they hope is to inspire the hope of nervous persons, inspire hope in nervous people who come to their first meeting and they don't even know if it's the right thing to do. And we share our life stories as they pertain to the recovery process. And those testimonies from peer support advocates can be very, very powerful, and they're certainly as authoritative and legitimate as from a paid psychiatrist.
Now, I'm curious, when you talk about self-will training, doesn't a person have to already have a little bit of self-will to begin a program for mental health recovery?
Yes, that is an unfortunate irony, and it's a problem that is visibly demonstrated to me in the past. We've had newcomers sit out in the parking lot in their car during the whole meeting, and maybe they'll come in at the last minute to get some material, and I'll ask them, why didn't you come in for the meeting? And they'll say they were too nervous. It was too much to ask of them at that point whether they have the courage to make a mistake, as Dr. Lowe says. Maybe it is a mistake to come to a peer support meeting, but you won't know until you try it. So Dr. Lowe says have the courage to make a mistake. And yes, people have to have a little will to get going, but they understand that if they need help, it's out there available. We're not going to save the world of recovery. We're a nonprofit, and we don't have the personnel, but we can make a difference by helping people one at a time.
Now, if you could, for our listeners, what are some examples of bad habits, if you will, regarding one's mental health?
The bad habits are many, because Dr. Lowe has said that nervous people have an unending stream of original responses to the outer environment, meaning every nervous person is different and can have a different response or reaction to triggers, things that come out of the blue and can throw us out of joint or out of focus. So one bad habit by far is to allow your mental health to be compromised by stigma, because the world is full of stigma. 3 out of 4 people who are what you would say a nervous person, they report that they've experienced stigma in terms of feeling disgraced because they think that stigma sets them apart. When a person is labeled by their illness, they are seen as a part of a stereotype group. And negative attitudes can create prejudices which lead to more temper. Stigma brings experiences and feelings of shame and blame, distress, and reluctance to seek or accept help, what we just talked about. And families are also affected by stigma, leading to a lack of their support. For mental health professionals, stigma means that they themselves are seen as abnormal, corrupt, or evil, and their psychiatric treatments are often viewed with suspicion by people who need healing. So the worst habit is to not come to a meeting, or if you come, sit in your car in the parking lot. There's other bad habits, too, of sabotage, and we'll talk about those in a little bit.
Now, it is also said possibly that temper is like sabotage. Why is that?
Good point. Temper is a natural occurrence when we get worked up. So at our meetings, what our members do is share a little story about how they got worked up the previous weeks. And they are reminding each other and themselves that temperament is different from temper. We can't control our initial responses the way other people do because it's human nature to have been born nervous the way we are. So we go to these meetings to learn to be able to control and also to convince our brains, which are possibly not accepting the healing that can come, we have to govern that. And when we change the attitude of coming to the meeting and live with purpose, and purpose governs our lives, then the changes can happen.
Now, it's also known that some people kind of take pride in themselves on their temper. And what would you say, what would your be advice for someone like that?
Well, me being what Dr. Lowe calls an angry patient, I know a lot about temper. One thing I know about temper is that it blocks insight. So Dr. Lowe has a tool about that. He says, you have a right to your feelings. That's part of your nature, your temperament. They can be expressed, but in a cultured way, without yelling, without finger pointing, labeling. Temper, however, must always be suppressed because it brings in an element that is can put us out of control, I guess I would want to say. So to answer your question, why is temper sabotage? Because it blocks insight, and we know from coming to meetings that temper should be suppressed.
Now, I'm curious, with self-will training, does a person go through a lot of changes?
Yes, and it's always on the tip of their tongue. When am I going to feel better? When is this going to be over? When will I be normal? But with self-will training, because it is economical, we expect it's going to take some time. We're volunteers. So when a newcomer comes into the meeting and they're convinced that they want to start this, they start to build tolerance to the symptoms that brought them in so they can just function without symptoms, because symptoms are, they have the idiom of danger to nervous people. So this tolerance may last for the first 3 months. We recommend that newcomers try to come to a meeting every week for 3 months to let your subconscious absorb some of these coping skills that we're trying to show you. But again, people they want to see progress, they want to see results, and so they ask us, how long, or how am I doing, and how long is this going to take? This is where the peer support group is so important. This is where you cannot choose cognitive behavioral training on a computer. Those are available now, just in the last couple of years. But they don't allow the face-to-face experience of having other peer support members who know that you are improving. They mark your improvement. And they'll remind you the following week, we said that you did really good at that, so give yourself some credit now. Do some self-endorsing. Dr. Lowe says self-endorsing is the only thing that restores lost self-confidence or lost self-esteem. Now the newcomer is in a period that Dr. Lowe calls nerve resistance. Building nerve resistance means you just won't tolerate the symptoms that you used to be subject to. That could take anywhere from 6 months to 6 years, depending on how resistant to therapy or healing that your tolerance, that your symptoms are. I like to always use humor in here, though. We laugh a lot at my meetings. And I tell people the final step now is total immunity from symptoms. There's only been 4 people who have achieved total immunity from symptoms. Jesus, Buddha, Dr. Lowe, maybe Frank Sinatra. But no, they won't accept that. But they want to know what's in the future, because Dr. Lowe says all of nervous people's fears are based on the fear of the permanent handicap. We're all afraid we're never going to get better. We're all afraid that we'll never measure up. And that fear will spark and feed other types of fear. Or anger, too. Some people only have one thing to say when something goes wrong. Why me? Why this? Why now? And we talk about this for newcomers. They shouldn't even use the word why, because any sentence that starts with the word why includes temper.
Now, people can often sometimes find themselves stuck, and they might possibly even lose hope because life has lost its meaning. What would you say to people who are stuck like that?
I've met many people like that. Not all RI leaders take work down calls, but I do. I take calls from people all over the country, and I'll give them a 5-minute work down, helping them spot their temper and their tensions, and suggesting a few coping skills that might help you. But what comes to mind, what I usually say to people on this work down call is, first of all, drop the judgment. If there's any judgment about somebody else or about you for this predicament that you're in, drop it. That's temper. The number 2 thing would be lower your expectations. Make it a possibility that you could be mentally balanced with a little less that you thought you would be able to. And so by lowering expectations, you give your brain a little room to breathe. The other one is to use part acts. Sometimes these people who first at a meeting or they call for a work down call, they feel hopeless that the situation will never change because it's so big. And they're basing the end result is their basis for to keep trying. And Dr. Lowe says that end result is outer environment. You cannot control it. You can't control what other people say or do. All you can do is change your attitude about it. So by helping a newcomer take a big situation that's oppressive and break it down into manageable part acts, and then self-endorse all along the way, because Dr. Lowe says self-endorse for efforts, not for progress.
Now, for our listeners out there, what are some tools or techniques that can be used to help with people such as friends or family who are dealing with temper and tension?
With a family, Dr. Lowe says tension is 10 times what it is, 10 times for nervous people what it is outside the family or for non-nervous people. We all want what we want, everything. We want a mate who feels like a family and a lover who's exotic or surprising. We want to be youthful adventurers, but also middle-aged mothers. We want intimacy in our life and autonomy at the same time. We want safety and stimulation, reassurance and novelty, coziness and thrills. But we can't have it all. Dr. Lowe's main purpose for this program is to show us that this was fate appointed, this condition that we're working with here. The actual concept of being a nervous person, according to Dr. Lowe, is this was a fate appointed condition, and there's nobody to blame, and there's no reason for us to feel guilty about it. So Dr. Lowe gives us that carte blanche to say, accept yourself, your nature, your temperament, and accept that you have been sensitized as a nervous person by an endless career of suffering. And your reactions are just innocent outpourings, very average. So once a person accepts that, then they don't expect so much out of their life, and they're a lot easier to be around, especially with family, by wearing the mask. In other words, not allowing your emotions to show. You create a calm or peace. That's another powerful tool. Peace over power. I never thought that peace would be as useful as power, but in all situations, peace will always win out because peace is the fruit of life. Another couple of tools there, be group-minded and not single-minded or self-minded. Be group-minded at all times, and the harmony and peace that you feel that you want will come.
So with these tools, would it be possible as a person to do a more effective job of helping people suffer with mental and health symptoms?
Well, that leads right back to our last question. I read somewhere that suffering, if you can't transform your suffering, you are transmitting it to someone. So unless you regain and maintain your mental health, all of the purposes are going to be frustrated. It's only when you keep well and when you're able to discharge your duties as spouse, friend, relative, that you're able to use the method to find harmony in relationships that were difficult. And there are difficult people in families. So we say make your mental health your ultimate, all-absorbing goal. There's another way of showing that, which I like to do with a blackboard because I'm a former journalism teacher and I like visual images. So I'll write on the board, never surrender or never compromise your mental health for, and I'll draw a big line and a period. I said, now anything you put in that line, on that line, is going to indicate your priorities. And you'll see people will say, oh, I can accept that, I can accept that. But no, there's always one thing that they will put on that line. And it won't take them long to come up with it. So then I say, okay, well then you're going to sacrifice your mental health for this dog named Charlie. How are you going to help Charlie if you have a panic and a condition where you can't even take care of yourself? Whatever you put in that blank, if they have your supreme priorities over your mental health, you're not going to be any help to them. It's only by being objective about your condition that you will be able to be group-minded and be able to help other people.
Now, Rob, for our listeners out there, how can they find out more about Recovery International?
Boy, there's a lot of stuff on the internet now about mental health and mental health aids, but our program starts with our own website, which is www.recoveryinternational.org. I have a blog site of my own I've been working on for about 6 years, and that is www.selfhelptools, selfhelptools.org. We also like people to attend at least one of our meetings and see for themselves what it's like. You can go to that recoveryinternational.com site and you can find out where there are meetings in your area. We also have phone meetings and chat meetings. So a nervous person who will accept this program and to become a member, it's $35 a year. The end results or the opportunities that come there are to go to a weekly meeting and meet with other nervous people and leaders who are peer support mentors, and try one of the phone meetings and listen in and see what people say about the program and how it has helped them. There's also other mental health aid organizations out there. We've partnered many times with NAMI, and NAMI has some good programs of their own. We did a survey once. It turned out that all of our members of 80% of them belong to multiple mental aid groups like 12-step or churches, faith-based groups that meet to give each other support. And then hospitals have support groups as well. So we try to keep our brochures in the hospital. Here in Portland, this is an exciting time to be in this field because last month Portland opened the Unity Behavioral Center in Northeast Portland. This is a conglomeration or a cooperation of 5 major agencies that are dedicated to providing at least 100 beds every night for people who have a mental health condition that requires them to be stabilized. This is good for everybody, even and especially for the EMTs, the police and the emergency people who deal with folks in a mental health crisis, because now there will be a clearinghouse, a place to take them to get them started, and that had never happened before. So I think in the next year or two, watch the newspapers, and you'll see a lot about this Unity Center. And beyond that, talk to nervous people. You know nervous people. We all have nervous people in our families. Talk to them in a way that they don't think you're talking down to them. Don't use temperamental language that might be upsetting to them. And above all, compliment these nervous people. Pay them a compliment, something simple. You look really nice today. That compliment may come up at the end of the day when they're feeling bad about themselves and be turned into a self-endorsement. Well, at least Rob said I look good today. It may not feel like a good day, but he said I look good, so I'm going to go with that. That's a secure thought. And nervous people need to put those secure thoughts in their back pocket so that if a fearful thought comes along and needs to be neutralized, you pull that secure thought out and you look at it, you think about it. Give it 15 seconds. Endorsements need 15 seconds too. 15 seconds to get to the subconscious so that this becomes an internal change, a system of change that you have downloaded. Practice peace over power in your family whenever possible, because calm begins calm and temper begets temper, and in families, temper will blow up 10 times what it will in any other type of situation. We honor anybody who has been working with the mental health, so we appreciate this opportunity to tell you about it, because, Daniel, you've done a lot of good in this town since you invited me and posted my blog. So we want to thank you folks at Beyond 50 Radio and let you know that we'll always be here for you.
Well, thank you so much, and we really appreciate having you on the program to share this with people, let them know that there's hope out there and that it is available, and they can go to Recovery International's website at recoveryinternational.com. And they can also discover more by visiting the website, which is selfhelptools.org, where they can discover more. Rob, thank you so much for joining us here on the program today.
Thank you, Daniel. Good luck and God bless.
You bet. We want to thank you, the listeners out there, for joining us. You can also discover more at beyond50radio.com. That is number 50. We encourage you to sign up for our free weekly e-newsletter and stay up to date on what's going on in the world of Beyond 50 as well as upcoming programs. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for tuning in. This is the Beyond 50 radio program, and remember, live your day past halfway.